Hey everyone, and welcome. In this guide, you'll learn the best defensive setups for Killjoy on Ascent. You'll not only be learning the default standard setups the pros are using to completely lock down sites, but you'll also be learning some insane traps you can set to get free kills without even having to shoot your gun. Now, these pro setups aren't just one person's opinion, but rather created from researching the top Killjoy players and consulting with the top pros and coaches in Valorant. Additionally, the map Ascent is by far Killjoy's most powerful map to be played on. In fact, if you're someone who struggles with the map Ascent, then you may want to consider picking up Killjoy after watching this guide. And if you're serious about improving, then go to SkillCapped.com to unlock our hyper improvement system that will teach you how to win more gunfights, master your agent, and so much more. Backed by our rank improvement guarantee, you have nothing to lose. So come join over 500,000 satisfied members of SkillCapped, improve that KDA, and get the rank you've always wanted at SkillCapped.com, link in the description below. Alright, so let's jump straight into it, starting with Killjoy's best defensive setups, beginning on B site. First is the default setup you should be using the majority of the time. You begin by placing the turret on top of these barrels. This will watch both B main and players coming out of market. However, one of the main strengths is that it's hidden quite well behind the wall, making it difficult for enemies to both see as well as shoot at accurately and destroy. Next, you place your Alarmbot to the left side of the exit to B main, and follow this up with placing your Nanoswarm to the right, aiming to place it in this small crevice. This combination of using an Alarmbot with a Nanoswarm is really important for two reasons. First is the most obvious, which is that your Alarmbot applies a vulnerable debuff to the opponent, which makes them take double the damage from all sources. By placing a Nanoswarm nearby, you take advantage of this debuff to do way more damage. However, the second is less obvious. For example, let's say an opponent peeked B main and destroyed our turret. Well, most players at this point would activate their Nanoswarm as they'd be terrified someone has rushed into sight. This will result in you wasting your Nanoswarm and doing no damage. Instead, by placing an Alarmbot, you know only to activate the Nanoswarm once the Alarmbot is activated, getting kills way more often and knowing exactly when someone is pushing into sight. And lastly, we place a Nanoswarm against this wall, lined up with the dark line closest to the wooden stick. The purpose of this Nanoswarm is to prevent players from rushing out of B main and going Speedway into sight. By placing it behind the wall, it's harder for the enemies to spot and shoot, while also making it harder for the enemies to rush to the switch to close the door to market. So this is your default setup for B site. Turret on top of the barrels, Alarmbot to the left, Nanoswarm to the right, and a Nanoswarm behind the wall to cover Speedway. Once you have this setup, you want to position in such a way to peek off your turret's contact. One of the best spots is in the left side of CT. This not only lets you peek off your turret's contact, but if you're unable to re-peek due to too many enemies or missing your shots, you can hold this off angle to catch opponents rushing Speedway. Another option is to hold in market, again peeking off your turret's contact. What's important to note though is that when you have this turret set up, you do not want to play at stairs. This is because the enemy will be able to make contact with your turret and shoot it without you being able to see them and fire back. The important concepts to take away are to be able to peek off your turret since the opponent will be distracted by the turret shooting them, but also that you want to peek from a different angle than where your turret is placed. For example, this would be a terrible turret location, as the only location we can peek off of is exactly where the turret is placed. This makes it easy for the enemy to shoot us since they would already be aimed in the location we'll be peeking from. Now, as we mentioned before, the Alarmbot Nanoswarm combo can be extremely valuable. However, when you set up your Alarmbot on the left-hand side, you will run into the issue of good players shooting it. This is because they're able to see it poking out of the wall and will have a safe position to destroy it from if they know to look for it. When this happens, you'll want to use this variation, where you put the Alarmbot on the right-hand side instead. Then, look at this grate and you'll see a dark line pointing up from it. Move 2 tiles up from this dark line and place your Nanoswarm there. Your second Nanoswarm goes in the same spot as before. This will make it so your Alarmbot can't be destroyed unless they peek and activate it. Great, so you're now armed with a solid defense for B site. However, players will catch on to where you're placing things and positioning, so you'll want to switch things up. The best alternative setup for B site is the Speedway Trap, which can net you a ton of free kills. First, place your turret in the gap between these 2x4s. It's important you place it in this exact location, or else it will be easy to destroy or not activate properly. Next, we place our default Speedway Nanoswarm at the dark line next to the wooden stick. Then, we place the Alarmbot where the activation line is where the wall to our left ends. And lastly, there's an awesome hidden nanoswarm most players don't know about. You jump into sight and place it in the corner of this box and wall. This nanoswarm will cover Speedway while being extremely hard to see due to the majority of the visuals being hidden. Now the goal of the Speedway Trap is to purposely give up control of B main, trick the enemy into thinking they're safe to push in through Speedway. Then, as soon as your Alarmbot goes off, you activate both of your nanoswarms. They get hit with the vulnerable debuff by the Alarmbot, are unable to push through due to both of the nanoswarms, while also being shot by the turret, slowing them. What we recommend you do is go with the default standard setup the majority of the time, and then weave in the Speedway Trap every so often to catch them off guard. Now, both of these setups for B site are great at just that, defending B site, but sometimes your teammates are failing to defend mid, and the enemy is pushing B through market. When this happens, you want to use this setup. First, place your turret in the default spot on barrels. Then place your first nanoswarm in this crevice at B main. This will help delay rushes into B site and Speedway. Then go into market and place your Alarmbot on the right hand side. For your second nanoswarm, line up with the middle of the doorway and the dark line here. Now, once your Alarmbot activates, you can immediately activate the nanoswarm. One of the benefits of this nanoswarm is it gives the illusion that there's a safe location in the right hand corner. However, the enemy will still take damage. It's important to understand that on Ascent, when you're losing mid control, that your priority is to delay the push from mid into market, as they can quickly get onto B site safely without your teammates being able to rotate in time. However, when you do delay this push from market, your teammates can rotate really fast to your spawn and hold this angle from mid, preventing them from pushing through into your spawn while also scouting for the market push from mid. Alright, now moving on to the default setups for A site. You first begin by placing your turret in this corner. Make sure to right click to change the direction it's facing, and you want to jump forward to put it as far in the corner as you can, since this will make it most difficult for the enemy to see and hit. From here, you'll want to line up your nanoswarm using this grate. If you look in front of it, you'll see a triangle-like formation of 3 rocks, where there's 2 dark rocks on the left and 1 light rock on the bottom right. You want to place it in the center of these rocks. This will protect direct rushes onto site and will bait the enemy into rushing to the switch to close the door, something we'll be getting into shortly. Now, it's important to note that this grate won't show up if your detail quality is set below high. However, once you've memorized the lineup, you won't need the grate to remember where the triangle rock formation is. Alright, next you want to place your Alarmbot near the switch so that the edge of its activation circle is lined up with the door. Next, look at the ground and you'll see tiles mixed with grass. You want to find that one piece of grass that is sticking out on its own, not connected to any other grass. This placement is important as it creates a gap near the switch that can bait the opponent into thinking that it's safe, even though they will still take damage. The other benefit of this setup near switch is that it will often stop pushes from tree room. Once this is all set up, you'll find that you can stop the initial rush by the enemies, but at the same time you can bait them into thinking they can run to the left past your nanoswarm and take very little damage. This will then lure them into activating the switch, in which case you activate your nanoswarm off the Alarmbot, resulting in an easy kill. Overall, the goal of this default setup is to completely lock down A site without relying on your teammates. For example, if your teammate who's playing Catwalk is repeatedly dying, well then you can anchor in A site and delay the enemy from pushing into A site from A main or tree room. Meanwhile, this will buy time for your team to rotate and regain control of tree room. Now, in terms of where you'll position, you want to rotate between playing Generator and Boxes. Generator is the best spot as it can't be wallbanged and can give you great angles to peek from once your turret activates. The Boxes are a bit less ideal since they can be wallbanged, but if you only play Generator, you'll become too predictable, so you'll want to rotate between these two spots. It's also worth noting that you can play from A Heaven, but this is typically only done with an operator. The main downside of playing from A Heaven is that you don't have a safe angle on switch, so you're really only able to watch a push from A main. Now, just like for B site, we have an alternative setup that functions as a trap for tree room. First, you want to place your turret so that it's at the center of this wooden door. It's very important that you get this exact location so it activates at the right time and isn't easy to destroy by players in A main. Next, we don't want to place our default nanoswarm from before, since it will be too easy for the enemy to rush through the right side to switch and take barely any damage. Instead, you want to place a nanoswarm in this crevice in the wall on the right hand side. This will punish any players trying to push through towards switch, but keep in mind it will leave a gap they can sneak through. The benefit of this gap though is that it will force them to run straight into our turret. This interacts with a concept called angle advantage, which we've explained in other guides. An enemy player will want to hug the wall to their left so they are as far away from the corner near the turret as possible. This will allow them to see the turret and shoot them without the turret seeing them and shooting back. This is exactly what our Nanoswarm will prevent. Meanwhile, if they run to their right past the Nanoswarm, they will be too close to the corner to shoot the turret before it sees them. With all that being said, the main purpose of this setup is to set a trap up in Tree Room. You want to place your Alarmbot hugging the wall so its activation radius is at its max range for players entering Tree Room. You then want to place a Nanoswarm between this line on the wall and the plant pot to the right. When all of this is put together, what will happen is the enemy will peek into Tree Room. This activates the Alarmbot, which applies the vulnerable debuff, resulting in them taking double damage. The turret then shoots them for both damage and slowing them, and you then activate your Nanoswarm, which when the enemy tries to run back behind the corner, still damages them there. This Tree Room trap is great to use when you're having no issues holding A main pushes, but instead are constantly losing to Catwalk into Tree Room pushes. In fact, remember that first Nanoswarm we put down to stop A main pushes? Well, if the enemy isn't pushing A main at all, you can just place this Nanoswarm at the switch to further delay the push from Tree Room. Or if you want, you can simply place it to stop the default plant spot on Generator. To do this, you want to hide your Nanoswarm under this belt. It will still be visible, just a bit harder to see. This can allow you to play behind Generator, hide there if they're pushing through Catwalk, wait for them to plant, then activate it and peek on them for kills. Alright, so now that you have the best setups for both sites, you may be wondering, which site is the best for Killjoy to play? Well, the answer to that question is that it is highly dependent based on what agents your teammates have selected. For example, if you have a Sova on your team, well, Sova is supposed to solo hold B site on Ascent, using high wall penetration guns like a Sheriff, Ares, and Odin, along with his Recon Bolt to prevent B main pushes by wallbanging any enemies who try to push through. This would mean you'd want to play A site as Killjoy and give B site to your Sova. Alternatively, someone may have picked Cypher. In that case, Cypher has the better A hold due to his camera gaining early intel on A main, which lets him double up defense on Catwalk pushes in Tree Room. In this case, you would be better off holding B site as Killjoy. With all that being said though, you should start out the game playing the site you're most comfortable with and have the most success with. Then, if the other site is losing, swap with your teammates and defend that site instead. Just make sure that you don't fall into the super common mistake of holding the same site the whole defensive half while your teammates are getting destroyed on the other side of the map. Alright, we put a ton of effort into this guide, so if you're serious about improving and want to support what we do, then check out SkillCapped.com, link in the description below. Otherwise, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get more premium guides just like this one. We here at SkillCapped want to thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.